Asteroid of fear.
Welcome to the Men of the House. In today's episode, we're going to do Spencer Selio. He's a comic, and we'll talk all about it. But we just started up the conversation, and we're going to kick it like that. I have done an intro at the very end because the conversation was just so engaging. So, yeah, but that's kind of my thoughts on,
Yeah,
I,
man,
I
for sure.
definitely do think comedy is it's huge. I think especially if you get it, and I think there's people out there who don't get it. Um,
Well, let me push back on that a little bit. So I think it's all subjective, right? I feel
yeah,
like comedy has always been kind of a niche, and I think it's going to grow to be like music in the sense that everybody likes music, and I
yeah,
think everybody likes comedy. But I think a lot of people don't know what is for them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Somebody who's devoutly religious has religious music, and I think there are great comedians who fall in that maybe
Genre.
not religious comedy, but just an approachable, clean comedy. And I think that's more where we need to get with stand up instead of acting like you don't get comedy because you don't like this and the kind of culture war shit that we got.
Going on.
But the culture war, battle that everybody has going on, I think is just kind of like really bad for society, not to be too dramatic, but like we all have common ground. We're all just people and we all just want a little house and a family, or maybe not a family, or whatever
Yeah,
people, we all just want the
love.
right to our
I
own
think to love and be
self-determination.
loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if somebody doesn't want that, right? Even if it's an old man who wants to live, he might want to love his dog or he might want to love his horse or whatever. Like, I just think
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants self-determination. And I think telling people what they can and can't laugh at or what they should laugh at, I think both is kind of going on. I think we railed against in the mid 2010s to be like, we should be allowed to say anything. Anything's funny, which I agree with. But I also don't think we need to impose that onto other people. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? We
yeah.
don't need to force them to like it. Both are true.
It's funny what you said about the whole thing is like everybody likes music, everybody likes comedy. Maybe they just don't know it. Like it's kind of
Exactly.
like this. Maybe they don't really know necessarily what it is, but like, let's say you're in a break room and you make a joke, and even if it's a
Hmm.
corny joke and you laugh, that is a version, a form of comedy. But
Hmm.
people have this idea of going, well, what I see, this raunchy stuff over here, that's what I think comedy is. But no, comedy really ranges from that all the
Hmm.
way to kind of like it could be a joke in a break room. And it's really a matter of finding out what's for you, just like a stadium show, a rock show, or you
Hmm.
might like an acoustic set at a coffee shop.
You might like a little jazz, no music, just a guy just strumming a bass while you sip a fancy cocktail. Maybe that's your jam. And maybe me or you would look at that and go, this is the most boring thing I've ever watched. But for somebody, that's what they love. And I think we shouldn't, kind of make anybody feel bad about that. I think Andrew Dice Clay to Maria Bamford, you've got everything in between. And I love all of it. And I think because I'm a comedy nerd, I can appreciate all of it. But then I've also seen the way that comedy can kind of divide us by people not understanding the nuance between it. By
Yeah,
think everything is comedy, yes, but comedy's subjective.
yeah.
And I've done comedy everywhere, and I've done jokes that I know work for the majority of people. And then those same jokes, you take them into a certain environment, all of a sudden, it's not even funny. It's just me talking or me upsetting people. And I'm not even I rarely curse in my act. I don't really talk about anything quote unquote offensive. But to some people, they might hate what I have to offer. But that you don't take personally because you understand that everyone just has their own personal experiences tied to what they think is funny.
Yeah. Well, let's start it off. Where did you grow up?
I grew
That's
up in Denton, Texas, mostly. So I grew up,
oh.
a little bit in Pottsboro, Texas. Have you ever been up there?
I've heard of it. I feel
Yeah.
like I've seen the sign. But I've 100% been to Denton. A buddy of mine from Bedford was living in Denton, and man, we went to this. I don't know where it is, but was like a cool little downtown square. They had like
Oh
maybe
yeah.
this used record bookstore type of
Oh
thing.
yeah, man. Oh
And then
yeah.
right down the road
Hmm.
was this bakery that
Yep.
had pastries that were just out of sight. And even my wife, we were saying the girl behind the counter was cute. She was dressed up like had this it looked like a 1950s kind of skirt, like old
Yeah.
1950s housewife baker type of thing going on. Um, but
You're gonna
yeah,
see some weird fashion choices when in Denton, Texas, because it's a cool little college town, and I think I'm grateful for Denton because obviously it's in Texas,
yeah,
right? So and I moved to New York City for 6 years, and that gave me a real perspective on where I grew up, being a quote unquote liberal town, but it's in Texas. So
yeah.
I found myself kind of in a real interesting position of like I have my own personal beliefs and values, but I can understand. I feel like kind of a little bit of everybody's where they fall because
Hmm.
of the melting pot that is Texas, whether culturally, racially, and financially.
Yeah. So how did you grow up? What did your parents do? I mean, in terms of were you what in school, we're all little kids. We have subjects we're interested in. We all want to be something obscene and crazy. But yeah, how did you grow up? Were you a class clown? Did you get in any trouble? Anything like that?
Not one bit. I was very much a good kid. Do you know what I mean? I was
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna get straight A's. I'm gonna do all this
follow the
because
rules.
yeah, my parents are pretty wild, respectfully. I have no relationship with my father at all, and he's, for lack of a better word, just a straight up meth addict, crazy biker guy. But he grew up in a upper middle class Italian family. And
Wow.
so I had that loose connection to his side of the family, even though he did everything he could to kind of, reject them and separate them.
Right.
I got glimpses of, oh, this is what a regular, nice, comfortable life could be. But my dad kind of fetishized the grind so much, he made me live it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's moving out to Pottsboro to be a motorcycle mechanic at a Harley shop. And then, the guy who works there just doesn't get him. So screw this guy. We're moving here and doing this. And then he finally decided to open up his own shop in 2006, which, if you do some history, 2006 was not a great time to get into the motorcycle business because
Hmm.
about 24 months later, that whole industry just collapsed. And then he, after that moment, really lost his mind on drugs and kind of went crazy and everything. Went down to Houston, and that's where they really make the meth. That's where
Oh
they
yeah.
really get after it.
Yeah, my wife's from the Woodlands, and my in-laws live on the other side of Houston, like the Galveston near side, and
Yep.
man, just going through there. I'm always like, I refer to Houston as the dirty, dirty. I do
Mm.
not, I don't like much about it.
It's so dirty. It's grimy. I used to go down there as a kid and spend summers there. And my dad worked with this guy named Greg, who was a full-blown skinhead. I'm talking,
Yeah.
full blown, had a swastika like right here. And,
Hmm.
I was like 13. I had taken some history classes. I wasn't, I was like, hey, what's going on with that? And my dad was like, he just did it to get through prison. But I'm like, well, but he's wearing a tank top. So maybe,
Yeah.
maybe he puts on a turtleneck, to hang out now. But he would grind his teeth and sounded like DMX and was just like a wild guy. So I would have these touches of just pure insanity. But my mom was a dental assistant. Not a great job, obviously, but just enough to kind of just clock in, clock out, create enough of stability that when I would have these wild moments as a kid, it made me realize, like, oh, I want nothing to do with this. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people make crime and crazy people be, it's like cool, Breaking Bad is fun and edgy, right? But in reality, all of that stuff is really gross and really just not fun to be around. Like there's not a lot of like the way that people treat each other in those environments is very crabs in a barrel. All friendships are very loose. Everyone's backstabbing everybody. There's no real like bond.
My
You know what I mean?
godfather was a Cossack.
Okay, yeah. So my grandfather was in the Banditos down in Houston,
Hmm.
and he's a wild, wild guy. And so inadvertently, my mom married basically her dad. Didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
Was like 17. My dad was 21. I found out recently my dad went to prom at 21 with my mom. That's just loser behavior. You know what I mean? If you if
Yeah,
you're you can buy booze and you're at a senior prom, that's just a rough look.
that's wild.
It's wild. And so he was just a real bum, and my mom had to kind of fight through all of that and survive. And God bless her for all her effort. And so I was around a lot of craziness and a lot of crazy parties, and I was quote unquote only child. But I think the phrasing of only children is very much like it's
I'm an
all
only
steeped.
child.
But I don't know if you experience this, because if you grow up with money, all the stereotypes of only children are true. But if you don't, none of them are really true. They're like, you got everything you wanted, everybody would listen to you, and all these things. And I'm like, no, no, actually, none of that happened. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
was very much just a latchkey kid, home alone a lot, watching ESPN and Comedy Central and trying to make sense of the world.
man. So, what is it like? I haven't been to Denton too much, but I reflect on my experiences back at, let's say, University of Florida. Would you consider Denton a college town with
Yeah,
UNT
I
there?
think I think because there's really no other industry there, right? You have the University of North Texas and you have Texas
Mhm.
Women's University, and then in Corinth you have Collin County Community College, right? I think that's what. No, no, maybe I'm getting it messed up. Anyway, but you've got like three colleges very close to Denton, and then it's a very big commuter school. So a lot of people drive in to UNT or drive into DW. And then there's really nothing else going on there besides those colleges. There isn't like, I mean, now there is, let me say, like it's changed a lot. Obviously, I'm 29, but when I was growing up, it was just like the hub a little bit of this and then nothing, right? And then the second you go north to Sanger, nothing, right? So I think Denton was kind of a hot spot for anybody who was gay, trans, or whatever was like, I'm going to live here and figure it out. And so that kind of gave me an access to a perspective that I think if I had grown up in Pottsboro, I certainly wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of curious because I grew up in Bullard, which is outside of Tyler. When I moved here, there was 464 people.
Wow.
I think when I left, it was 800 and something. It's much bigger now, but you go from a two-way stop maybe to a four-way stop. Super duper religious,
Hmm.
2A school, and if I'm almost 20 years older than you, you can think of how restricted or
Yeah.
yeah. And so the reason I look at that is I look at you and I think about your journey and kind of even if you had like let's say the Pottsboro experience, you still
Mhm.
had Denton with quite a bit of culture to see and influence because for me growing up here, it's not like going to Tyler. Even now, the culture's
Mm.
still not there. For us, when I was 17 or 18, we had to go to Dallas to do anything really.
Right.
The most exciting thing we had when I was underage, I think, was a 24-hour coffee shop in Longview. And that was quite,
Yeah.
a hike. And yeah, that was in the mid
No, didn't have
90s.
didn't have a ton of culture. I mean, but also that kind of, I think there's something about when you grow up in a college town, depending on how much uh, guidance you have from parents can be a little
Right.
dangerous because I'm at college parties when I'm 15, 16. And
Exactly.
for anyone who's just listening, I still look 16 right now. So
Yeah.
when I was 15, 16, I was, I'm 6'3" now. At the time, I started high school about 5'2", 5'3". I mean, I was little,
I
little.
was 4'11 and 90 pounds as a freshman.
Yeah. So I was about right there with you. Like, I mean, maybe a couple inches taller, but right there at the 90 pound, just tiny. And then so I'm thrown in these wild environments where I shouldn't be there. One of my friends growing up, him and his mom lived in an apartment on Fry Street,
Mm-hmm.
which is the college bar street. It's like the Sixth Street of Denton. Obviously, it's much
Okay.
smaller because it's Denton, but it's like the party street. So my buddy starts selling weed back then, and we're hanging out with these college kids. And, um, looking back now, especially once I got to their age, I was like, man, these guys were losers. Why were they hanging out with us? But
Yeah.
when I was in high school, I was like, man, this is so cool. And then I started to learn, like, oh, I don't really like these people and I don't like this. But when you're 15, 16, you're kind of internalizing it as like, oh, I don't get along with these people. But then as I got older, it taught me a lot really fast of like how to move and how to read people and how to get a good judge of character quickly. And the same comes from being around a lot of crazy criminals and a lot of real danger and just, being like, okay, getting a read on somebody with a gun of like, are they a good guy with a gun or are they a bad guy with a gun,
Yeah, yeah.
And most of the time they're just my dad's weird friend, but you just gotta, you know, pick up and learn fast.
So, what were you as you're navigating through, even as a little kid, what were you
Hmm.
thinking of being? Like, I mean, for me, I always wanted to be like a musician or in the military or FBI or something like that. What were you wanting to be as a kid?
I think I had such tangible goals. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because was, we weren't, I like to say I grew up really poor, but it's more that I felt the poverty more than there was
Right.
because my dad came from what I consider like a rich family.
Hmm.
It obviously wasn't just upper middle class. My grandfather, born in Jersey, broke, became a patent lawyer. Towards the end of his life, had a nice upper middle class, beautiful house in Richardson that I'd go to as a
Right.
kid with a pool, and I'd be like, "What the hell?" He had a Mercedes and a gold watch, and I was like, "That's how you do it, right?" So to me, my goals were very much just I see my mom, and I see my grandma on my mom's side and how poor they are and how everybody on my mom's side of the family is just has nothing, right? The best people on my mom's side of the family just were infantry members in the military,
Yeah.
in the army, right? Like just full bottom level, and those people were killing it, right? So I had this duality of perspective of class of like, this is how I want to live, this is how I'm living. So when I was a kid, I very much was like, I'm gonna get straight A's in school because my dad's dad is gonna buy me a toy at Toys R Us. He'll get me a new Game Boy game if I get a straight A's, and I every time I'm getting those straight A's because it's
We're
the only time
very
I'm getting
similar.
anything. Yeah, you need that.
Yeah.
You need that as a kid. You need something, and I'm so grateful to have had that because without it, I really don't know. I would have been very untethered, right? I wouldn't have had any type of thing to kind of keep me on a straight and narrow. And not that I really did, but I would live a duality of life where I would play soccer and all my soccer kids were, kind of nerdy, straight edge kids. And then I would have my weird stoner friends, but they
Hmm.
also were still making good grades. So I kind of was all like focused on go to school, get a scholarship, do this. And never even thought about comedy, never thought about doing any type of artistic thing because as a kid, I could never draw. I wasn't good at writing. I was good at math and science, and I
When
could
did
get
you
my way through,
when did you first smoke weed?
very young. Let's see, seventh grade. So what is that? Uh,
14 usually.
no,
No,
younger. It was
12.
like
12.
I think I was
Yeah.
13. I think it was right when after I turned 13
Okay.
because my birthday's in April, and then you get out of school in June. I think it was that summer. So I think it was like right when I turned 13. Uh,
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking is because I think about like I was thinking of we're very similar in ways that um like mm, a lot of the stuff you said very much was resonating. Shit. I lost
I know
my
what you mean.
fucking
No,
my
you're good.
I lost my train of thought for a second. Um let me see. Hold on, if I see something maybe it'll. Oh, so I was asking you what when so I was very the same way, kind of.
Mhm.
I'm gonna get a scholarship, I'm gonna make straight A's.
Yep.
Um, I'm not gonna get in any trouble. Therefore, I never did. I didn't smoke till much later in life. Um,
Mm.
and so
I think
that's
that's
kind of
very
what,
good, by the way. If anyone's
yeah,
under 18 listening, do not like wait till your brain is developed. Wait till
yeah.
25.
I was much older, but that's kind of interesting to me that you still kind of you smoked, but maintain that drive of like, hey, I still want to get out of this. You still were able to
Hmm.
see that duality and
Yeah.
still be able to,
Well, I think I was really naive to how much the experimenting and everything was going to corrupt me, right? I thought I had
right.
this because I had a crazy family and I was able to go to school and nobody had any idea, I thought, okay, I can do the same thing. I can keep raising the stakes, baby. I'll do a little, crazy
Yeah.
white powder, see how it smells, and then try to keep it all going. And then I think a big thing for me that really kind of changed everything for me was like the Occupy Wall Street movement, which sounds cheesy, but seeing a bunch of people in 2012, I'm in high school. I'm a straight A student. All goals are to get a degree, and I'm taking these like after school classes or like seminars and stuff that are talking about like what you need to do to pay for college, and if you want to go to this college, what you have to do, and out of state tuition, and just starting to understand how the world works and how money works.
And were you
And then
thinking
I'm
of a
seeing,
specific career?
I was thinking of being an accountant.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew in my heart of hearts though that that wasn't, like I was taking accounting UIL,
Hmm.
which is like a competitive
Yeah,
accounting
yeah. No,
thing.
I did typing for UIL on an
Right.
IBM Selectric 2 typewriter.
Hell yeah. So I would just, I
Yeah.
was trying to create some sense of normalcy, but then I remember very quickly realizing that I was going to have to take out a ton of loans if I wanted to go to any school worth kind of any real merit because of just how the world works. And then seeing all the people who did go get college degrees and then go into the workforce and then not be able to get jobs, I'm watching them all protest this and say that this is unfair. Now, with 29-year-old hindsight and perspective of the world, those were a bunch of liberal arts kids kind of kind of moaning and groaning about, you know, there's some truth in it, right?
Yeah.
But the whole message was a little corrupted, right? At the end of the day, if you're poor, go get a college degree. It will help your life. And I got a full scholarship to UNT, but because it was in my hometown, it was the only school I applied for because I had already given up at that point. My grandparents, my grandfather had died at that point. I kind of lost the hope. I lost the
Right.
perspective of like, where is it going to go? So I got a scholarship, and then my mom had a tough run with it for a while where I couldn't live there. So now I'm trying to pay rent. I'm trying to work in a restaurant. Smelling a lot of white powder, seeing, and living in a house with a bunch of guys who come from good families.
Right.
So they, have this weird time in their life where they kind of just mess up and whatever. I drop out of college within 3 weeks, a month, something like that. I give up the full scholarship. And then my life really tumbles really hard for a few years until I was about 20. And then I finally started doing stand up. And that kind of gave me a little bit of like, okay, this is something. And I always wanted to do stand up, but it felt impossible for me because I was never a theater kid. I was never the class clown. I was funny, I hit a quick little line to my friend in the back of the room that gets him to laugh, and then he says it louder, and then
Right.
everyone else laughs. But I wasn't that. I never had the confidence. Um, yeah, I was never the center of attention with my family or in any kind of group environments, so it never felt like something I could do. And then I started working at a warehouse and listening to Mark Maron's podcast and like Joe Rogan's podcast
Yep.
and listening to comics and listening to their stories and going, oh, it's anything. You
Yeah.
don't have to be this one type of funny.
Right.
You can be whatever. And then I was fortunate that I think I was such a nerd and I studied it so much that by the time I started, I was able to kind of be relatively, decent at stand up from a young
Yeah.
age.
Because there's like that's the whole thing, which I love, like our 20-year difference. It shows. So like what was out when I was growing up. My first introduction to any sort of comedy would be on Sundays. My dad and I would watch Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
And but then Delirious, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, all
Hmm.
those were coming out. Um and I don't know that. So my parents were kind of hippies, and they didn't raise me like normal people.
Hmm.
Um, Kind of from the outside, it looks so, but I would say like things like, it was no big deal for me to be 9 years old watching HBO and seeing titties and stuff
Yeah.
like
I had
that.
this, I
Hey,
had the same experience.
it's
Yeah.
like it's nature. You're gonna see it
Yeah.
anyway, but they weren't real strict on. a lot of things in terms of they were like, they never said like don't do drugs. They just said this is what happens if you do. You
Yeah,
know, you probably don't want to do them. And I think that was enough for me because they told me and they weren't out doing it behind my back and stuff like that or hiding it. I just never had the desire to do anything like that. But,
that's great.
there was the other part of that is I think of, man, you guys like YouTube University having podcasts. There was no such
I
thing as a
missed that though
podcast growing up.
because it was before. So I was in high school from 2010 to 2014. So
Okay.
in reality, though, that YouTube University that we both know and have profited
Mm-hmm.
off of didn't really exist, I would say, in a true capacity till the later 2010s. You know what I mean? Yes, and maybe in a little bit in the early there was some, but if you wanted like stand-up comedy advice,
Yeah.
I was having a deep dive Mark Maron's podcast and listen to just like generationally rich people talk about their experiences. And it wasn't even really that tangible good advice, but it was something. It was the only thing that gave me like a close and open door to
Well,
like,
what
you
introduced you to
know,
podcasting? I mean, how did you, well, yeah, how did, I mean,
I was at the very early wave. I mean, it started around 2009, and so I think I was on my phone. I was early on Twitter,
mm-hmm.
and then I think that is probably how I discovered most of it. If I never really thought about it, I think it was probably through following comedians on Twitter, and I was a huge Comedy Central fan. So that was really what I had. I had Comedy Central. I had the occasional HBO special, and then I would watch, a little bit of, Conan was huge for me, especially once he started doing his own thing on TBS later on, because then that kind of felt like, oh, this is different. This isn't like, Jay Leno felt a little contrived. Even to me, I understand the history of comedy. I understand what David Letterman is now. But if you're my age coming up, David Letterman was just like this old crotchety man who was
Right.
rarely like he wasn't doing anything groundbreaking at that point. He had obviously, which is why he's who he is and he's a legend. I respect him. But if your first time watching David Letterman is 2005 to 2015, you're just kind of watching him be pervy to Drew Barrymore and whatever, and it didn't click. It wasn't like the thing. To me, Conan was the guy of like, okay, this is like I relate to this. I get his sensibilities. My parents watched Conan, so I would always kind of, stay up and watch it with them, which in hindsight's crazy because it's
Well,
time a
and
kid should
and
not
I
be.
didn't I didn't grow up watching any of those. And when a lot of people would watch Saturday Night Live and stuff, like I can appreciate it now, and I don't watch it,
Mhm.
but I, part of me wishes I would have, but maybe I don't know
I
that I
was
even
never,
knew
I
that
was
there
never an
was
SNL
comedy.
fan. Yeah.
I didn't, well, I think about where do you get access to comedy? Because I think of like when you're telling some of your story, and when I think of the age difference, and I go exposure and access, because I go, you're sitting in this warehouse, and you're like, I've always been interested in comedy. Um, I want to give it a try. So it was in the
Mhm.
warehouse that you're like, I'm going to
No, it was
try
honestly
it, or
before that. I have one of my good friends who I'm still friends with today who high school, about like
hmm
16, 17, through one of my other friends switched high schools in Denton because he went to a fancy program called IB to be like. So this is another cool. This guy was valedictorian of the high
hmm
school, but again, he was cool. We're doing drugs, so he's that kind of friend, and we're smoking cigars together for the first time. We're
okay.
17, right? First time ever smoking a cigar. I've smoked weed now at this point for 4 years. Smoked a
Right.
lot of blunts. Have a lot of experience smoking weed. Have never once smoked a cigar, so I have no idea about not inhaling.
Yeah.
I just immediately get sick within like a quarter of the cigar, just violently sick, puking all over the place. And I guess maybe that experience of how physically uncomfortable I was, I just told him that I wanted to do comedy and stand up. And, that was 17. So it was 3 years before I even tried it. Right. So I knew for some reason that I wanted to try it. I didn't have any like there was nothing to base that feeling off of, but I just had the
Right.
feeling of like, I would be good at this, you know?
I love that.
Yeah.
That makes me. I feel like I could hear Theo or Joe Rogan saying that. I'd be good at this. I think I can do this. Um, so okay, you said 3 years before, uh, but educated, you have podcasts and stuff to access. When is your
hmm
first time you're like, okay, how am I going to do this? You knew you were going to have to do an open mic, so I'm guessing you started
hmm
there. How did you start?
So I start listening to podcasts. Then, like, John Mulaney's New in Town special comes out in
Hmm.
2012. So that's I'm in high school still at that point. And uh-oh, lost you. All right, there it is. Um, so that was really influential. That got me inspired. Then I remember I was dating a girl for
Hmm.
a while, and I would talk to her about comedy all the time, all the time. Just couldn't stop talking about it, because then I knew I wanted to do it, and so but that lasted for like a long time. It lasted for like we dated about almost 2 years, so that was the entirety of that relationship. Then we break up, a very painful breakup, kind of out of nowhere, and then uh, about 6 months after that, I'm living alone during this time. I'm working at a warehouse. All my friends are in college. I'm kind of doing less drugs. I'm kind of, trying to figure life out. I'm trying to, I'm making 33 grand a year. I think I'm rich,
Yeah.
I'm not. And then I start going to watch open mics because I knew that's what I needed to do. But it felt like there's no way I could possibly do this. I've never done theater. I've never been on a stage. I've never done any type of performance. I can't sing. I can't dance. I don't play an instrument. Like I can't draw. I don't have any artistic expression within me. So this doesn't even feel like, why am I even thinking I can do this?
Right.
And then really watching an open mic. This is why I told you this when we met,
Hmm.
about anyone who has any inkling of doing stand-up comedy, just go watch an open mic because you will see people who have no business even trying to do it, but they have an overconfidence that allows them to do it. And that's not to say that they shouldn't. God bless them. I love that they're doing it. But it will, if you care and you
Yeah.
really like comedy, you'll see somebody who doesn't, but has the confidence to just go on stage. It's like you go and see karaoke, right?
Yeah.
There are going to be bad singers, but if they can just perform, they might be okay. And not to say that like even the bad comedians were bad, but they were bad to me in the sense that they
Right.
weren't telling jokes. They were just kind of being loud or sometimes not, just not even able to kind of formulate a thought or a joke. And so you see that and you go, wow,
Yeah.
I'll at least not be the worst. And
Yeah.
I think for me, that's always been something that's helped me, whether it's playing sports or playing anything. It's like, I just don't want to be the worst. I'm fine being in the middle of the pack. And I think seeing an open mic and seeing that, okay, there's room to grow within this because, there's some people are great, some people are terrible, some people should never do it again. Some people I think just need the confidence and then they would be great. And then you just see kind of the whole world of all of
Yeah.
it.
Because some people might just need a little direction, parameters, instruction, you
And you can
know?
watch that and clock that. And I think having taste in comedy, having opinions, and having awareness to what makes a good comedian is the first step to being one. You know,
Yeah.
like you need to have opinions on what comedy you like and what works for you. So that way, when you go on stage, you're able to express what, you know,
Hmm.
whatever you find funny. And I think seeing an open mic was really inspiring. But again, then it took me months, right? It was like
Now, were
I
you
saw that
writing? So that was one of the questions I had
hypothetically.
thought of. Like, the girl you dated with the bad breakup, you tell
hmm
her, you're verbally telling people to the
hmm
world, putting it in the universe. I'm gonna be a comedian, or I want to be. Um, are you have you written anything physically, or are you just kind of keeping mental note, like you have some kind of jokes on
Well,
hand type of thing, or what?
I thought I was writing, you know
Okay.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But you don't even know. So it's like, if you've never played football and you're drawing up plays,
Yeah.
sure, you're doing
You know what
something,
it
but
means.
but but you go there
Yeah.
and it just is gibberish. So it's like That's the main thing. You really can't prepare in a sense like that. The only way you can learn is from doing, because you're dealing with human emotion while you're on stage too. You're dealing with the adrenaline rush. You're dealing with, for me, massive, massive social anxiety, fear,
Uh-huh.
fear of being on stage, all of it. So the only, it's like the Mike Tyson thing. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
That's so true with stand up. Like, you can think and you really shouldn't have a script, I think you really just need to do it a lot, a lot till you get past the fear. And there's only exposure therapy kind of way to get to that level. I don't even think for your first, like, depending on, I think age really factors in, because
Hmm.
I think if you're an older person, doing stand up is much easier because you just have experience to draw back
Yeah.
on. You have things to say. The audience is willing to kind of listen to you more. But for younger people, just get on the stage and just you do anything, because in the beginning I was doing like weird one-liners, and I had long hair, and I was kind of doing like a dark Mitch Hedberg thing,
Yeah. Hmm.
which you saw me do stand up. That's not even kind of close to what I am now, really,
No. Yeah.
So you just need to get out there and do it, right? Like, I had all these plans for jokes and all these jokes written, and pretty much all of it's garbage by the second you do your first open mic, because you're just like, now you are getting actual honest feedback. Writing stand up in a vacuum is kind of, uh, you know, not
So walk
really, not going to get you anywhere.
walk us through your first open mic. What was it like? What were your emotions?
Yeah.
What were you thinking? What was and how did it turn out?
Oh, couldn't have been worse. Just to spoil the story, but so well, it could have been worse. Actually, let me say that. So January 3rd, 2017, the first time I did stand up. Going into New Year's Eve of that, I had just gotten off of work at the warehouse. I think
Well,
I
wait.
worked
And
till,
are we still in Denton?
yeah, I'm living in
Okay.
Denton,
Perfect.
renting a house from who became my stepdad's mom, who just owned one extra house, was renting it for cheap to some friends of my future stepdad. Uh, and then they decided to buy a house, moved out. All of a sudden, me and my girlfriend were able to move in there. Three-bedroom house in Denton, Texas for $750 a month. It was a
Wow.
gift that I'm still grateful for. Uh, and it wasn't like a special Nepo deal, right? Like,
Right.
she was doing that for everybody, but she just
Sometimes
didn't
that
know.
just happens.
It was a blessing. And so New Year's Eve, I'm working at a warehouse. I live alone. Come back to the house. The uh, it's I got off work, about 11:30, I want to say, like
Hmm.
right before the ball dropped. And I'm 20 years old, spending New Year's Eve going into 2017, just kind of watching. Like, I didn't even know what to watch. I was like, am I gonna watch the countdown on ABC? I don't know. Then I decided to watch it's that movie with Robin Williams where he's the teacher, the Oh Captain, My Captain. I don't know if you've ever
Dead
seen
Poet
that.
Society.
Dead Poet Society. So that's a good nerdy white guy hype up movie, right? Like, I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, this will get me inspired. And so I'm watching it and I'm feeling all jazzed up, and I decide to just I'd gone to watch this open mic multiple times at this point. I would say maybe three or four. And I knew it was an email sign up. So I just halfway through the movie sent the email sign up. And then, spoiler alert, if you've never seen the movie, kid kills himself at the end of the movie. And I immediately was like, what have I done? Oh God, this is
Unsend,
gonna,
unsend.
oh God, can I not do it? But then I just knew, like, okay, all right, I need to do this. And then I went, I was 50th out of 50 on the list, the closer.
The best for last.
And yeah. And then I got there right before the mic started, annoyed the host for the entire night. I mean, asked him about the list an ungodly amount of times. Just, knowing what I know now, couldn't have been more annoying to this guy, who I became friends with later on. He, uh, there's a bunch of names on the list who weren't even there. He's reading them
Yeah.
off. No one's there. Then he gets to my name and he goes, "Well, this next comment, I know he's here because he's been annoying me about the list all night. Put your hands together for Spencer Selio, or however you mispronounce it." And then I go up there and barely am able to get like 3 minutes out, at maybe. I'm like shaking, like
Yeah.
nothing's incoherent. There's five people in the room, maybe. I don't think I got a single laugh. And that was it. After after my terrible little performance, they flipped the lights on, and I'm just like, "Phew, wow, it's about as tough as it gets, you
Now,
know?
what were you thinking when you were up there? What was going through your mind?
Just panic, just stress, just pure adrenaline rush, you know? But I mean, just was not even, you
You
know,
kind of almost black out. Like I've spoken in front of large crowds, and sometimes I'm like, when you're done with it, I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck I said, but I was
there was no
talking.
there was no crowd though. That was what's
Uh,
funny in hindsight. It couldn't have been a more perfect little safe environment, but I was just I had made it mean so much to me
yeah.
for no reason that I built it up and built it up and built it up and built it up, and I had all these delusions of grandeur of what I was going to be and all these things. And then again, you get punched in the mouth, you're just like, oh, And then I go out to my car and I'm like tearing up a little bit, you know what I mean? Like trying to be like, no, it's fine, it's fine. I don't even, it was no big deal, like trying to convince myself all these things. And um, I think because it was so bad, I was desperate to do it again because it felt like that can't be. You know what I mean? Like that can't be what I can do, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you ever heard that some what is it like gamblers actually get a dopamine hit from losing?
Oh, definitely with comedy, that's so true. Yeah.
And so I it made me think of like you're like that what you said like no that can't be it like I'm chasing more. There's something
hmm
more because otherwise fucking people wouldn't go back,
hmm
you know? That's what it made me think of.
And then yeah, the laughs. I even now as a comic, like when I have a good set, I don't really feel like good. It is very gambler-esque. It's more just kind of like that's like the expectation, right? Like
Right.
it needs to be here. If it's not here, we need to go back and
It's
revisit
like,
and
hey,
analyze
I
and
didn't lose my ass. And so as long as you don't lose your ass,
hmm
you're okay.
Yeah.
But um how so now did you write out some jokes? Now was it 3 minutes? Did they you said you got about 3 minutes in now did they assign you 3 minutes? Because this is similar to fighting where
hmm
I took martial arts and competed, and uh, everybody's like, man, 3 minute rounds, that's nothing. And it's probably the same like in comedy is like, oh man, I could do 3 minutes. I could do anything for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's really not like that
Well,
when you're in
it's like
there.
anything. It's like martial arts where when you first do it, you can't do 30 seconds. And the same with stand up, and the same with
Yeah.
running, right? If you're trying to run a marathon and you've never run, you can't run 3 miles. So you can't do a little 5K to even get yourself in shape because your body just can't handle
Mhm.
it. So you have to just slowly build and acclimate yourself to the environment, right? Like it's elevation, you have to
Yeah.
like become accustomed to the air up there where especially for somebody like me who's not a performer. I think for people who do theater or they sing or they like the attention, they like the lights, if you're an introvert, if you're a quiet
Hmm.
person, it is the antithesis of how I like to be as a person. So it's how do I be my authentic self in this environment that is forcing me to be somebody else? And that took me legitimately probably like 5 years to get to where I felt like, okay, I'm actually being myself on stage.
Now, did you write for your first open mic or did you wing it?
I'm sure I did. Oh, I'm sure I did. But I think it was, you know, I don't think any of it was even coherent, right? Like I think I had you know, what did Trump say? I had concepts of a plan,
Hmm.
like I had hypothetically, I had jokes. And then the
Yeah.
second I got up there, my hands are shaking. I'm trying to look at my notebook. You know what I mean? It's just it's all gone.
So how soon did you go back?
I think I went back to that open mic the next week, and I think um
Hey guys, quick break, but this one's important. If you're tired of setting goals that never leave the Notes app, or you're feeling stuck in the same cycle, let's change that. Accountability isn't about pressure, it's about partnership. I offer one on one accountability coaching for those who are ready to show up, not just for their goals, but for themselves, their families, and their purpose. Whether you're working on discipline, building better habits, or simply trying to stay consistent, I got you. No fluff, no judgment, just real conversations and real progress. If that sounds like something you need, Hit the link in the show notes and let's connect. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, I think I took about a week, and then I went to Hyenas as a chain of
Hmm.
comedy clubs.
Yeah.
And I started going there, and that's where I met one of my first friends in stand up, going up at like 2 a.m. after being there from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Some of the worst times of my life, to be honest with you. I really had bad memories of that place. But then I got lucky. There was an open mic in my hometown of Denton, Texas that I found maybe 2 weeks later after having done one or two, maybe three sets in this taco shop. And it was a super low stakes environment. And so that, I think, out of nowhere, I was able to kind of perform well. And then I met some friends very quickly after that because they thought I had been doing stand up for much longer than I had been doing it because that was the first time I was able to kind of just do what I was trying to do because I
Yeah.
didn't have as much fear and there wasn't really bright lights in the room. It was a little tiny stage that's built for
Yeah.
musicians kind of vibe. And so that gave me a more comfortable experience to be like, here are the jokes that I've written, you know, because I'm more of a joke writer. It's more like, how do I present these jokes I've written? And then it took me a little bit of, even then, like that was the first time I had a good set. And then there was months and months of bad ones after because of the fear, right? It's like, how do you wrestle that down, keep the adrenaline in check, and try to be authentic?
Now, were you at this point in time? Another thing with a 20-year difference is you have this ability where you're recording any of your open mic sets.
Not at all, because this is, you got to think, right? This is 2017. So the idea of posting all of your stand up doesn't really become
Well, not for
something that,
posting, but for, what is it? Joe Rogan says Damon Wayans always recorded his sets.
and that's something that I think if you come from a family that teaches you
Yeah.
how to work at stand up, you know, again, like there was hurdles for me so much at the beginning of just like learning curve where like I never used a camera. I never know how to do anything. Like I learned all this stuff in the pandemic because I'd already moved to New York at that point after, doing stand up for a little bit. And then I hit the pandemic and I had no footage of my stand up because I hadn't filmed a single thing. I had a couple clips of a couple sets filmed from when I would do a
Right.
show and they'll film it for you in exchange for not paying you. That's a
Yeah.
big one they do in comedy a lot. They're like, "We'll give you a great clip of your great
Yeah.
footage of your set in exchange for giving you $0." And bringer shows, by the way, which means you bring five people, you're giving the club hundreds of dollars.
Right.
In exchange, you're just getting footage of you doing well. Um, but I had one of those sets filmed that went really well. And so at one point I posted on the stand-up Reddit page of like, hey, I'm thinking about moving different cities because I'm not getting any opportunities in Dallas. When's advice to move? And the people in the comments were surprisingly very supportive of like my stand-up and were like, there's no right time to move, yada yada. So with $200 and a job at Starbucks, I was like, let's go to New York City. And
Wow.
then started cutting my teeth, bombing uncontrollably. Again, it was like starting all over, right? Like whatever
Yeah.
confidence and little bit of steam I had, the second I got to New York City, it just got kicked in the dirt and destroyed.
So did you at this point before you decided to move to New York, did you quit the warehouse, go to Starbucks? Like did you do
Yep.
something to where, hey, I'm
Mhm.
able to be in these open mics or be out late at night? It's kind of like, you know, I worked with a steel guitar player one time
Yeah.
and he's like, in Nashville country music, if you want to be on the list, the way they do it is you move to Nashville, you get a day job, and then you get on a list because a lot of these big acts do hired guns.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's how it works there. So you quit the warehouse, Starbucks, you're like, you can transfer, you find this
Yep.
opportunity.
Well, it was,
How,
it was short-term goals in the beginning, right? So I got a job at a Starbucks in Denton, and the goal was to move to Dallas. And then I did that. Then I started living in Dallas for about 4 months, and then I
mhm,
realized, like, oh, this didn't change anything.
right,
People kind of always thought I lived in Dallas just because I drove down here to do these open mics all the time, and everybody sees me how they see me, and it's not going to change anything. And I was very headstrong and wanted to get more opportunities other than open mics. And the Dallas comedy scene was not really supportive to me or my friends at the time. My buddy Fernando Ruiz, who's a very funny
Mhm.
comic, Ralph Barbosa, who's become
Yeah.
extremely successful. And that was really validating to see his success later on because I knew at 20, 21 years old, this guy's really funny.
Yeah.
And I think I'm funny. And why are we not getting any opportunities? And it was just a, bad set of circumstances with,
So where does, speaking of opportunities, um, okay, so you move with the intention of getting more spots ultimately,
Mhm.
because how does opportunity work? You do open mics, so you're
Yep.
putting yourself out there, and then how does one transition from open mic to opportunity of getting paid for
I
comedy?
think in hindsight, it's just about being good. You just have to be undeniably good. You just have to get laughs
So does
and
somebody
be,
ask you? Do they say like, "Hey,
yeah,
like they see you at open mic and they're like, you're funny. I want to
yep,
you be a opener for me or something like
exactly,
that?"
exactly that. Yeah,
Or is it even does it come the same way? Like if you're funny, they might ask you to host.
exactly. Yeah. And you just got to like, there's a lot of being a good soldier kind of
Hmm.
mentality where I did that a lot, where I'd work for comedy clubs, I'd work the door, I'd, sweep up. I'm doing anything possible. And I think that's a kind of a bad, and maybe, if you're young and you got years to burn, it's fine. But what the problem with that is now the club is going to see you as kind of an employee. They're going
Right.
to devalue your stand up because of what you do off the stage. So really, you just have to be undeniably good. And that's why it's such a difficult thing to do because you have to invest so much time, energy, and resources into this without getting any money back. And so that's why so many people who either, have a good job or come from good families or sometimes both are able to like, quote unquote, make it so much quicker. And young comedians generally, yet now with social media, there's opportunity for somebody like
Hmm.
Ralph to really take advantage of that and catch a wave and display his talents and then double down, triple down, and just continue to get better and everything. And so that's inspiring. But that's almost like winning the lotto, right? Not to say that he got lucky. I'm saying that you have to. That's he's the exception to the rule of like he was just so talented that it all just kind of worked out. But really, it's a marathon journey of work and effort and life experience and perspective that all is going to tie into eventually becoming a what I consider like a good comedian. You know what I mean? Like it's all subjective, right? So it's like you can make it faster if you're willing to do certain things. If you want to be an actor, if you want to make social media content like sketches and stuff like that, that
Yeah.
can really help expedite the process. But if you want to just do stand-up comedy, it's going to take a long time.
So when you get to New York, do you move in with anyone or do you
Yep. Me and my buddy Fernando move out there. We're living together for about a year until his girlfriend moves out. Then they get their own place. So then I'm kind of stranded. Then I move in with a girl I'm dating very briefly at the time. I'm working the door at a comedy club
Mhm.
to get spots. So I'm working for free at the comedy club for about 8 hours to do 5 minutes for free, which is called a check spot, meaning that there's two comics left in the show. The host goes on stage, they announce that the show's almost over, but that the checks are now coming around. So every single audience member is now getting their bill. And the second they're getting their bill, I am grabbing the microphone, like directly 1-to-1 ratio. The host introduced me, the waitress or waiter is watching me go on stage, and the second I'm going on stage, now she's peppering every single person with their check. It's the worst environment for a comedian to develop impossible. It's crazy, but it was so hard. It was like so running with weights that destroyed my confidence in my mental health. But it made me a
Uh-huh.
good comic over a long time. Of like, oh, no matter what is in front of me, I'm going to work through it. You know what I mean? And just also exposure therapy to bombing, because I think being able to bomb on stage and get no laughs, but without ruining the vibe, not making them feel bad, that's a skill in itself, you know?
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things I brought up because one of the things I love to discuss on my show is there's always an element of resilience. And I, there's no doubt how resilient you have to be after eating a bag of dicks and then
Absolutely.
asked to go back up and for some more. Um,
You have to be
what?
delusional. Like, let me put it like that.
Yeah,
Like, you have to have a core belief that nobody else sees. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to have positive self-talk. Even if while you're having negative self-talk, there has to be a core, a kernel
right.
of true, true believer status. You know what I mean? You got to believe that Bigfoot's real no matter what everyone says in front of you, and you got to know it without with just everything in your bones. And even when that rattle that'll shake and rattle, you'll lose it a little bit, but then you got to find it, and you got to grab it, and you got to just keep holding on to like your belief in yourself, regardless of all the evidence in front of you, because there will be lots.
Yeah.
Depending. I mean, look, there are people who are super talented and they just get it. I wasn't one of those people. I had some ability to do stand up, but I wasn't a natural performer. I
Right.
was very very young, and I didn't really know how to talk about my life experiences in a way that was approachable. So I made a lot of crowds feel very uncomfortable trying to do a joke about my childhood that just sounds like a kid just kind of like, I don't know, doing something weird up there.
Yeah, man. That so what is do you did what where do you think you developed the mental fortitude? Do you think it was something maybe your upbringing, just that natural chaos that you grew up in
Yeah,
is kind
definitely.
of certainly helped. Now, did a lot of do you have any comic mentors in New York or anybody like that that would say,
Oh,
"Hey, like,
I had a
yeah,
really unfortunate set of circumstances where I know how to pick the worst mentors, and I think that is a reflection of not having the best father figure. I think I see a guy who's a bad guy, and I go, I'm gonna do anything for this guy, you
yeah,
know? And that served me really, really wrong. Like I got taken advantage of, not literally, not sexually, but I got just I would produce people's podcasts for years, get
yeah,
nothing out of it. I produced a guy's comedy special, got nothing out of it. Or not produced, I edited a special, and like I was just willing to do anything. And I think when you're willing to do anything, if you pick the right people and get lucky, it's good. But I just had a way of picking the worst people to be my quote unquote mentor, and they would never mentor me. They would just take advantage of my effort and work ethic for years until I realized, oh no. And then I would think the next guy that I'm picking to work with, he gets me, he's cool. And then no, again, it's another one who's never going to help me and not going to do anything. And I think now I'm learning this literally within the last 2 years, I would say,
mm-hmm,
just knowing that there's no one's going to save you. There's no mentor coming. Like you have to do your judge, jury, executioner as a stand-up comedian. You have to do every single job, and it's tiring and it sucks. But you either accept it, you work with it, and it is what it is, or you go be an accountant.
yeah." Yeah, one of the first things I thought of when you were talking about that was the other night. You said, "Okay, I've been doing it 8 years, 9 years," and I go, "Okay, so that's two presidential terms."
Yeah,
And when we were talking about what where you were just talking about the work and you're intelligent obviously and you have the ability, this ethic, the ability to organize and structure from school. So given like let's say two presidential elections, politics, um what do you what's your process for research of topics for writing jokes? It's like when I thought I wanted to go to medical school and you got to take the MCAT, they make you get a subscription to the Wall Street Journal because you need to be up on current events and when you
hmm
have to do the writing portion of it. And so, because I know there's all kinds of comedians and there's joke writers, there's people who do skits and shit and whatever.
yeah,
But, you know, essentially, the politics does reflect like periods, snapshots in time of the world and what's going on during those times. And Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
I
um,
think good stand-up, though, in my opinion, again, it's
uh-huh.
all subjective, but the stand-up I like is kind of devoid of time and place
Mhm.
and politics. I mean, I don't really do political humor. I
But how
have
does it
opinions
does
on
it
that,
now? How does
but
it influence? Does it have any influence?
I think it has the influence, and then I try to have it have no influence. Does that make
Okay.
sense? I try to
Hmm.
make my stand-up work for, the biggest Trump supporter and then the most leftist person possible. Because
Hmm.
I'm a very left-leaning person. I have very progressive politics. And I think, unfortunately, people can just kind of read that on me. So if I'm in front of a certain crowd, I will just bomb no matter what I do
Yeah.
because of just my tattoos and the vibe I'm given or whatever.
Right.
Which is funny because those are the people who say, "Oh, you can't say anything anymore," and then I go up and I just do a Nate Bargatze impression, and they don't, and they're like, "Oh, this liberal's got to get out of here," you know. So I think my comedy is just it's mostly personal based. It's mostly personal experience based. And I think I learned from a young age also to not try to take on big topics about the world because at the time I'm 22. What do you really
Yeah.
have to say about race in America? You know what I mean?
Right.
You have interesting things to say about what happened at work as a barista,
Yeah.
that is you can just talk about what you know, which is the cliche that everybody says about writing, whether it's movies, books or anything. Generally, if you're, I think good comedy, my comedy that I like is nonfiction, and so I try to stick to that, stick to what do I know, what do I, because I'm not like I'm not an alt comic. I don't know how to do like creative ironic bits and stuff like that. When
Yeah.
I watch that comedy, I love it, and it makes me want to quit comedy because it's like watching someone shred the electric guitar,
Yeah.
and then I pull out my acoustic guitar and I do a Bob Dylan song. I like that stuff more than but I know who I am, and I think perspective and honesty with who you are is kind of really important to comedy too, because the audience sees you more than you see yourself.
Hmm. So, like, like I know for me, anytime I think of something that I would consider a comedic bit, it's usually
Hmm.
like observational type
Yeah.
stuff out in the everyday world. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
and you
would,
write that down, and then here's the thing I feel like I've learned over years is that you're going to have 100 jokes you think are jokes that aren't.
yeah,
And the only way to know that they're not jokes is to try them in front of people and realize that, like, oh, this is not a joke. And I think a big thing you can learn is kind of conversationally funny things. I think I did that a lot before I did stand up. And even while doing stand up, I'll just kind of shoehorn in a bit into a
yeah.
conversation and see if it gets a laugh. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it's like a good rule of like writing comedy, but I think it gave me confidence to just kind of say it out loud, get the beats of it, feel like, okay, is this something? And then you go try it on stage. And then, from the first time it works on stage to the time it's what I consider a joke, those are typically two different things because it's like, you're whittling something down. You're starting with there's
Yeah.
bark, there's something that's crazy. And then to turn it into a beautiful little arrowhead, that takes time, patience, looking at
Pre
it a different way, showing it to a
precision.
friend. Yeah, precision. And you have to kind of just do all of that over time. And then it kind of, that pearl is formed, right?
Do you do you have a core group of comic friends that you can bounce ideas off of? Anything like that?
I definitely could. I just don't really like that because I think, and a lot of comedians do. A lot of comedians love bouncing bits. Occasionally I will, especially if it has anything to do with race. As a white guy,
Right.
I'm gonna tap into somebody else to make sure it's coming across the right way. But if for me, I think my comedy comes from what I like and what I think is funny, and I don't really need another super opinionated person's opinion on my opinion because I don't really want the negative feedback. If I get no laughs from an audience, that's one thing. But if I get a comedian going, I don't really get that, now I've lost my confidence in that being a joke, and I won't even try it in front of the crowd because this comedian I like doesn't think it's even kind of anything. And typically, comedians aren't going to do that to you. They're not going to be like, "Oh, that's not a joke." But I just learned over the years that like when I try to, bounce bits, the comedian's not even really going to get it most of the time. and then I go up on stage and it works. And I'm like, well, that whole process just gave me like an emotional imbalance that I didn't need. I don't need to feel like, oh, is it, that kind of, butterflies in your stomach. You need to just go up and do it. The audience will tell you. And then even if that audience loves it, you don't even know if it's a joke yet because you got to go try it in front of a different audience. And you got to just do that. It's repetition
It's
more than
almost
it
like a
is.
scientific experiment and way like a what results need to be repeatable, and that like the last fucking step of the
Yeah,
scientific process that you learned way back when.
100%. 100%.
Although I've heard some comedians talk about that, definitely um with repeatability could be dependent on what part of the country you're in because parts of the country are so fucking different.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's more not even really parts of the, I guess part of the country is true, but it's more like, does this group of people get into kind of a group think?
Uh-huh.
And is it against you or is it with you? Like I did a show for a guy who is very, very right leaning, like online, and his followers are like as about, strong as it gets.
Yeah.
And I had to do 30 minutes up top, cold open, and I just straight up bombed, all caps bombed. Outdoor venue, 250 people for 30 straight minutes of no laughter on jokes that I've been doing comedy at this point now. It had been, a long 8 years. I know that these
Yeah.
jokes work. That's why they're in the 30-minute act because I have an hour's worth of material. The 30-minute act, especially in the environment I know I'm going in, is just jokes that I know work. But those people have get into a group think, and once, and it's like an unconscious thing that happens. It's really beautiful in a sense. It's the opposite of what happens when the group think happens with the crowd, and they go, "We love this guy," and you can say anything kind of funny, and you're getting laughs, right? Like there's just a thing that happens. It's connection. It's unspoken.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
spiritual in a weird sense that but they all collectively together without speaking decided we hate this, and I could see all their faces, and they hated it for 30 straight minutes. And so you have those experiences in the comic that are horrible. I wouldn't wish it on an enemy. But by the time I'm having the 30 minutes of bombing, I've had a million 5 minutes of bombing. Millions an exaggeration, obviously, but like I've
Yeah.
had, dozens of horrible bombs. So when I get to the 30 minutes of bombing, I know it's not me because I know these jokes work. I know I'm performing well, and it was a gig for money, and I'm just gonna not make it weird. I'm gonna make fun of myself a little bit for how awkward it is because it's like
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's an insane experience, but all you can do is just kind of be present, be honest, and be open. And I think that'll either work or it won't. And you have to you got to live with the results.
Man, I could imagine like what's it like? Like I think of being on a stage and looking out and when you were saying like it's kind of like this silent encapsulation that you can see that's like being able to
You can
picture that and go,
you can feel it. You can feel it on an emotional level. You can feel the palpable like kind of anger and disgust from the people in the crowd, which to me is funny
right,
because all I'm doing is talking and giving you the opportunity to have a good time. Now, because of how you perceive me based on the way I look, and I don't know, I did a joke about TikTok in the opening set, opening
right.
5 minutes. Maybe that's where I went wrong because they all hate TikTok or whatever. It's the China app or whatever. So, that whatever they perceive, I think they've
Yeah,
now decided that they don't like me. But again, I've lived enough life to be like, we would get along fine if we had a conversation.
right.
But they're just deciding that. So that to me is kind of funny, and I can get out of myself in that moment and not lose myself to other people's perception of you, you know?
Yeah, because I told my daughter one time, like, I remember some earlier episodes making some jokes or something, and she had heard something, and she said something to me, and she goes, "It's just a joke, Dad." And I was like, "Oh yeah," because I think I was kind of making that point of like, you know, you, you're, you are not your act. You're a person having a
Of course.
conversation. There are
Yep.
bits and truths and pieces to people's acts, but that does, people forget that like a movie is actors reading lines. Comedy
Right.
is entertainment.
Hmm.
It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be kind of offensive. I mean, I worked 6 years in a level one trauma center,
Right.
nights in downtown Austin, for 3.5 years on
Oof.
weekends. And so I've seen everything. And, humor is a huge way that, somebody comes in with a dildo stuck up their ass. And
Mhm.
the doctor says, does he want us to take it out or change the batteries? You know, because probably 10 minutes ago, there
Yeah.
was a 5 car pileup and we're treating people where people died. And
Yeah.
it's just the way it
Gallows humor.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been in a lot of situations. I mean from the military to work when you work in kitchens too, it's fast,
Yep. I've worked in a
and
lot of kitchens. Yeah.
you there's a lot of humor in there. Um
Definitely.
but it's very kind of that it's those environments, the ER, the military, kitchens, they're fast paced. It's not the person please and thank you. It's like all that's kind of, you know, considered.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, let's just do this, crush this, and have fun, and then have a good laugh about it. Um, but what is what is one of your biggest achievements? Something that might be known and something that might be unknown that
I
people
mean,
don't know you for. If like
I
I
got,
had no clue who you were until I met you
yeah.
Saturday.
I think I got lucky in about 2022. I had a stand-up clip on Reddit get some traction, and Nikki Glazer saw it, played it on her podcast,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then all of a sudden I'm getting DMs from random people saying, "Hey, Nikki Glazer shouted you out on her podcast," and I was like, "Oh, cool," And then that was it, right? That was just like a
Right.
cool little moment. Nothing came of it. She followed me on Instagram, and I was like, "That's cool." And I had I've been working the door at comedy club, so I thought like, "Oh, that'll kind of get me going somewhere," and then it didn't really. But the real achievement I would say was about 2 years after that, or about a year and a half after that. I reached out to her to be like, "Hey, I'm really struggling in comedy. Do you have any advice?" And she goes, "You want to open for me in Atlanta?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, So flies me out to Atlanta, puts me up in a fancy hotel, and I get to perform in a theater for about 2,000 people. Just going up right before her, doing 15, 20 minutes, something like that. And I got like applause breaks multiple times. And it was like, okay, no matter what happens, no matter if I have to just do whatever job for the rest of my life, if I die poor or whatever, I at least have this moment to be like 2,000 people in an Atlanta theater who have no idea who I am. I'm doing the job. And then afterwards, she sent me a bunch of texts like, "Hey, you're great," and even talking with her at the show and hanging out with her
Yeah.
that whole night and everything. She was great and cool and was like, "You're gonna make it. You're gonna be famous." Like all the things you'd hope a famous comedian would tell you. She told me, and then she had me like picture jokes for the Netflix roast, and that was huge, right? Like
Oh yeah.
once she did that Netflix roast, her career really changed. Like she was already obviously doing theaters of
Yeah.
huge size, but instead of doing one night in Atlanta, now she sells out the Beacon Theater 8 times in a row, right? So both good and bad. It was a really cool opportunity moment for me, but then now she's in a position where she can't really help me anymore as a comic. But that again goes back to my point of like it is all about you. You have to put in all the work, you have to do everything. And I think the older I get, the more I'm just grateful in that like comedy as a skill set is somewhat objective if you're in front of people who want to see comedy. And I feel like that, they can't take that away from me, right?
Right.
I can have a bad back, I can't go to the doctor, I'll never own a home, I might not be able to have a family, but I got these jokes.
Mm. Yeah. What I mean, so on that note, what do you love most about it and what keeps you coming back to it? Because let's see, I met my wife when I was 29. Um, she threw me my 30th birthday party.
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah, it's been a while. So I think about this time of going, you're 29. What, I go like, well, what would keep me married to my wife for this long? What's going to get you
Mhm.
to 48 as a comic? What's kept you grinding for 8 years? Because I know you
I
mentioned
mean,
when we
I
talked
tried
that
to quit. Yeah.
you thought about quitting and just
No, I thought about
bartending
it. Absolutely
and you
tried.
just couldn't do
Yeah.
it.
Well, I think what I just realized is that like I don't have any skills or family money structure or anything. So it's like there is no grass is greener situation for me. I love doing stand up. I always wanted to stand up. I don't want to quit stand up because I don't like doing stand up.
Right.
I just don't like the business of having to sell myself, having to, put myself out there because that's what I'm doing on stage. I want to be, I like the old version of stand up where you had a manager, you had an agent, and they do that, and that gets me where it gets me, and I just live with the circumstances. Now, which is better, I want to be clear. It's better that it's all in the hands of the creator, it's all in the hands of the performer to put all your stuff out there, make anything you want. All cameras are good now, lighting's cheap. Like any idea you have, you can execute it, you can make it
You can
happen.
live anywhere.
You can live anywhere and you can do anything and make it happen. But I just like doing stand-up comedy. And for me, I've accepted that that puts me in a niche and that will kind of maybe put a ceiling on where I can go, maybe. But I'm gonna live with those wherever those cards fall. I like doing stand-up. It feels true to me, it feels authentic. Anytime I act, anytime I try to do anything like that, I don't like it, doesn't feel
Yeah.
comfortable. And maybe that's something I would get over, like with stand up and the fear, and that's possibly true. But I don't really have any desire to do it. So I think if you don't have any desire, I'll let the people who want to do that do that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna keep doing stand up wherever I can, wherever they'll let me. And Christopher, who booked me at Rose City Comedy Club in Tyler, Texas, that was the first time I'd done stand up in 2 months, I think. And I'm able to just go there and do four 15-minute sets, each one of them different, and that feels cool to be like, all right, I still can just do this, like all that work doesn't really just fade away in a couple months. And so anywhere that I can get paid to do comedy, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, because it's kind of like I think of, well, there's a little piece of me that goes like, you sell yourself short when you're like, I don't have any skills, but you do. It's like the same as me going, so I feel the same in that this is what I enjoy. I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the podcast part of it.
Hmm.
I had to learn a bunch of fucking skills in order to do this.
Of
Just like
course.
you said, you've done podcast production and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and it had realized, when I realized, hey, all the people I was interviewing to fill nursing positions helped
Hmm.
me to interview guests on a podcast,
Yeah.
and so yes, you do have some skills, but
Yeah. I
you
have those
just
skills,
want to
but I
do
mean, yeah,
I
like
get it
I
because
mean, I mean, in the sense that like when I apply to jobs for video editing
yeah,
and video production, they're not returning the application. They're not hitting
yeah,
me up. I've tried, like I have the skills, but I don't have the resume, I guess would be the better word, right?
yeah.
I don't have the connection to override the resume. A lot of,
But
you
those
know
are
what I
the
mean?
people who want to do that shit anyway. I mean, if you're like me, you don't want to sit behind a fucking editing for 8 hours. No.
I don't, but I also really don't want to be a barista anymore? If I got to
I
make
mean,
another cup of coffee, I'm gonna lose my mind.
dude, I'm one step away with the man bun. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like a reservist ready to go. A
Yeah,
barista
dude, we'll
a
call you. We'll
barista
call you.
reservist. I actually helped before Starbucks was even a thing. I there was a brief period I came back before I moved back to Florida. I helped open the first bagel shop in Tyler, Texas. It was New York. It was called New York Bagel Company out of Oklahoma. It was a man, we had, and so I was a barista.
Nice.
And yeah,
Nice.
but it was cool because we got to open it, like build it out, set it up. We had somebody who had a local coffee shop and he had one of his baristas come and train because, this was in the 90s, 97,
Hmm.
maybe 96. And so it was I don't know if they're all electric machines, but it was tamper press. You know, you're timing the shots. It needs to be 22 to 27-second drip, so it's
Yep.
not too acidic or whatever.
Hasn't changed,
Um,
my man. You get behind the
yeah.
espresso machine, be ready to
So
go.
that owner who owned like coffee farms and shit, one day I thought I got in trouble. The owners called me in and they were like, he said, they were like, he just said you made the best espresso he's ever had, the best cup.
Hell
I
yeah.
was like,
Hell yeah.
yes. But of course, you know, it didn't do anything for my career.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are you gonna do? What's the future look like for Spencer Celia? What do you have coming up? Do you have any spots coming up? Are you doing local?
Ah, I
What's
got
going
nothing.
on?
I'm in a full just get back out there kind of mode. I gotta just restart. I gotta reignite the passion and just start trying to boots on the ground and give it another couple years of effort. And I'm always gonna do stand up for fun, of course, but the pursuit of it being my career, I'm gonna give that another about 5 years, probably, maybe six. And then if not, go back to school, teach history, teach math, be a gym teacher. You know what I mean? Like that's something I feel like I would like doing, and just try to figure it out in the meantime.
You could always teach comedy, teach joke writing, maybe
I
make
think you
you.
should, I think I need a little more success before I'm teaching the class, but sure. Yeah.
Oh,
I
you
think
did.
I think I think pitching some jokes to Nikki Glazer that she didn't use isn't really enough of a career to get
Yeah,
behind the chalkboard with that one.
yeah. So, do you hit any open mics local up there?
I haven't. No, I mean, I certainly a little bit. I mean, but here's the thing: it's like I go from doing it every day to doing it sporadically. To me, that feels like I'm not even really doing it. So, yeah, maybe occasionally, once every couple weeks, I'll do it. But I'm trying to get back into that mentality of doing it every day. I think what's hard is, when you watching open mic comedy isn't really the most entertaining experience. And I've spent basically my entire adult life now, from 20 to 29, just watching open mic comedy. And it's hard to be like, yeah, here we go, baby, let's do it again. So I love doing stand up. I think the time and energy it takes to do it is definitely draining. And so there's no real answer. It's kind of in between, right? We'll see where it goes.
Man, I hear you. Well, sounds like a good place to wrap it up. And look, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. First of all,
Hell yeah,
um,
man.
second of all, I enjoyed the show thoroughly. I'm glad I chose to go to the show because there was this point I was like, well, maybe we'll go to the comedy show or I'll take her to see the accountant too. But then there was this whole
Mm,
conundrum of I took her to Texas de Brazil. If you're going to a steakhouse, I'm like, well, if I go to the movie before, she's going to want popcorn. Then will we want the steakhouse? If we go to the
right.
steakhouse, is she going to want popcorn? And then do I really want to sit with everybody else at a 9:30 showing on a Saturday night in a movie theater?
Hmm.
Those people, I'm not those people. So I said, we're going to go see a comedy show. It had
Well,
been
I'm glad
since
you
her
did, man.
birthday. And oh, I'm fucking glad I did too. It was awesome. You guys killed it. You guys, all three of you were funny as shit. I had a great time. I had some good visceral laughs and got to interview a comedian. And
Yeah, absolutely, man. It was a great conversation. You're great at interviewing, and you should definitely keep it going for sure, man.
yeah, well, we're in the same boat. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I will definitely keep in touch. And if you have any sets or if I'm ever in Dallas, I will hit you up and it won't be for a fucking coffee. How about that?
Hey, Richard, I
Also,
appreciate you, man.
other question. Did you really skydive?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was totally true. Every part
Okay.
of that story is true.
I skydived at 17 after I graduated high school a year early before I went
Yeah.
in the Navy. But I did tandem because there was no way I fucking trusted myself after a couple of hours of ground school that I wasn't gonna fucking kill myself. And
Well,
ours was the kind that
yeah.
you go and you hang off the fucking wing thing and you
Hmm.
let go. And I
Woo.
was like, fuck all that. I'm going tandem. And
Yeah,
it
in
about
hindsight,
put my nuts in
that's
my
the
throat.
advice. I'll leave for people. Do tandem skydiving. Don't go by yourself.
Yes. Awesome, man.
All right,
Well,
Rachel. Great
I'll leave it.
conversation, bro.
Yes. And I always say, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
That's
Awesome, man.
beautiful.
Peace out,
Take it
man.
easy. Let go.